In the previous video I made, I installed LEDs on an amplifier foot switch right here. And that one went so well that I've decided I'm going to modify this one too. This switch is a little different than the first one because this manufacturer used a printed circuit board instead of wire for the electrical connections. So I'm going to either take the board completely out or use wire and wire it up accordingly. Got the same components as I had before. There's my LEDs, my resistors, my socket. This time I'm going to do it a little different also because I'm going to add a battery. And I'm still going to use the power for the coax switch. By using the normally closed shunt, which is shown right here, I could then power this off of the battery. That's the symbol for a battery. That would go through and feed just like that if there's nothing plugged in. So if I forget to plug it in, then it won't work. The socket, this right here, I've identified the terminals accordingly. Okay, so this is the negative, this is the positive, and then there's the shunt in between. I also went ahead and cleaned up the little drawing I made of the cable that I use. Okay, so this diagram represents one of these right here. So, because I found in the last one that some of the polarity was confusing, so this makes it a lot clearer. I've decided to position the battery on the back wall, at least as of right now. I've got the clip on there so you can see how it would go. Another possibility is putting it right in the middle. Okay, so here you can see I've unsoldered the board. Okay. To do that, you just need one of these, called a solder sucker. To use the device, you push the plunger down, heat up the solder joint, place the sucker on the heated joint, and release the plunger. This pulls the hot solder off the joint and into the device. We're going to use these contacts, the first two, for the reverb and the overdrive. This is the reverb. And the other contacts directly across, right there, I can use for switching. I've also gone ahead and mounted the battery, because as mentioned I'm going to change this one from the last one. I took the battery clip and I mounted it using this. I really didn't want to drill into the back of this case because the screws would stick out the back and I'd have to use some very small screws, just create obstacles. I thought about perhaps using a pop rivet, but that would take up too much room as well, and the pop rivets stick out in the back. So I decided to try this and see if it works. I'm going to go ahead and put a big clamp on it overnight and see if that doesn't hold. Okay, so the idea of using the tape on there, the sticky tape, works very well. Okay. This is pretty solid. It'll just be a bit of a pain in the neck to change this because of clearance. That'll work. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take and cut this down. I'm going to cut off this side of each on this board because I don't need those. I'll be using those contacts for the switching. So I'm going to cut that in half with a Dremel and do the same thing on this side. Alright, so I cut the board and I'm going to put some sort of insulation on that so it doesn't short out. I've also marked for drilling my holes. Here's where my power is going to go in, right there. And because of the battery in this one, I'm going to actually move the LEDs below the switches. You can see my pencil mark right there and right there. I've done some pre-wiring and I did the power outlet plus an LED. I put the resistor on it. I decided to go ahead and use the liquid tape wherever possible now so I can get better coverage. It's easier to reach into, and I used a little bit of heat shrink tubing as well. Okay, my idea for using this board on the switches has changed because I broke one of the foot switches. So I've ordered replacements, and I'm going to have to unsolder this little board and just wire everything up accordingly. Alright, here the switches are in and all the wiring is complete. These new switches are slightly different because they're 3-pole and not 2 like the old ones. And because I have the battery connected, when I push the switches, the LEDs come on. When we connect to power, if this doesn't have any power, it shuts them off. Okay, if I have power, this is going to override. If I forget to disconnect, I can always shut it off. Okay, so like I say, with the power cable in, I'll get my power off the board. But once I take this out, that'll do it. So for giggles, I made up this little assembly because I want to see how long would a battery last with these LEDs. I even contemplated putting a battery in this one because I didn't before. If I plug it in, the lights will come on. And I've had it burning now for almost 24 hours. And this was an old battery. I just leave it on the bench. So if you went with a battery backup, it lasts a long time. Okay, so here it is a week later. That battery, that used battery, is still making the LEDs shine. Not quite as bright, but they're still working. And I went ahead and I put a battery clip on the side here. I use that same sticky tape that I have.